Welcome to another episode of Lead with Jeffrey podcast. I'm Jeffrey Hernandez, your host, and today I'm incredibly honored to have in our studio the Commissioner of Education for the USVI Islands. We are so excited to have Dr. Dionne Wells, who has come today to join us in our studio all the way from the USVI to tell us a little bit about education on the island and, more importantly, how she feels about the crossroads of education and how she's preparing for that. We have in our studio today someone who's not only been an educator for 30 years, but is leading 3 territories and making sure that the students on the U.S. Virgin Islands are prepared for the world of tomorrow. So with no further delay, if you are not sitting down, sit down, because this is a podcast you don't want to miss, especially if you have students, especially if you have children at the age of schooling. This is a very important conversation, given the fact that we are at the crossroads of education. And are we really preparing our students for the world of the unknown that awaits them? Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We are so excited. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for us to educate as well as to have a conversation about a very important topic, which is the crossroads of education.
Yes.
But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and who you are, what you stand for, and what brought you here today?
So, as mentioned, I'm Dr. Dionne Wells-Hedrington, Commissioner for the Virgin Islands Department of Education. I've actually been in education 30 years. I celebrated my 30th anniversary, October 2023.
Wow.
And so education is my life. I worked my way up the ranks, and so I remember my days as a teacher, assistant principal, superintendent, chief operations officer, now commissioner. And so for me, Jeff, it's all about the students. Everything that I do, I always keep the students at the center. And I really want to make sure that public education becomes a viable option where we're actually preparing our students for life.
I agree with you. You know, we have so much in common because I started as a part-time clerk and also went up the ranks all the way to deputy superintendent. And that does make a difference. What do you think that's done for you? To be able to say, I've sat in every position in education, now I'm leading education.
So I consider my trajectory a blessing because it really has afforded me the opportunity to see how things should be at each level. And one of the things that I did as a leader, when I became an assistant principal, for example, I remember all the things that I didn't receive as a teacher. And so I wanted to make sure that on top of my list was supporting my teachers in the trenches, making sure that they had the resources, the professional development, and the support that came from me. And as I moved my way up the ranks, I remember all the levels that I've come from, and I look for ways that I can make people's jobs easier as well as equip them with what they need to be successful.
You know, you said something that's really important is as we go up the ranks, we remember what it was to be in that position and empower them with those gaps that we felt. Can you give us an example of something you felt that you have changed now as commissioner in the territory to make sure that no one has to feel that?
So one of the things that I talked to my senior cabinet about is just presence on our campuses. So at the district level, when I served as the superintendent, I made sure that my coordinators, who were content area specialists, had schedules to go into the schools to support teaching and learning. Remember that that's where everything happens. That's where the transformation takes place. And so that has still continued, as well as making sure that our assistant principals and principals have leadership skills and management skills in order for them to be effective. A lot of times we enter into positions and people assume because you have the credentials, that means that you know what it takes to lead.
Absolutely.
And that is far from the case. And so being able to provide them with the skills that they need in order to be successful is something that I have continued in this particular role that I'm in now.
You know, Commissioner, since we have so many listeners that are superintendents, that are educators, leaders, you have gone up the ranks and you've been able to take people with you. And that's a blessing. But how do we allow other people to benefit from that and understand the importance of having those key individuals that go up with you from position to position? Tell us a little bit about how you selected those individuals that have followed your trajectory, and more importantly, how has it impacted your leadership?
So when I look at those who are around me in my senior cabinet, I look for people who complete the package. Not compete with me, but complete the package.
I love that.
So one of the things, like my chief chief of staff or my educational turnaround officer, for example, I look for those qualities that I need to see in order to bring about the change that those positions represent. So my chief of staff has to be organized, has to be able to keep my calendar, schedule my meetings, be that buffer between me and the community. And so I look for those qualities in that particular person. My ETO, educational turnaround officer, has to be organized as well, but more of an instructional leader, more of a person who knows what it takes to bring about transformation within our schools that are low performing. And so being able to really pay attention to the qualities that people bring forth, I'm able to make some changes that benefit them and benefit the organization as well.
You know, you said something that a lot of people don't really think about. It's a complete package.
Correct.
And how they are able to complete you as a commissioner, as a leader, and not someone who's competing against you. How do you deal with that energy and that culture, fostering it, build upon it, to build upon it, and more importantly, to mentor them to become that complete package for you?
So sitting in the position as commissioner and knowing that eventually I will leave this position and do something else, right?
Maybe you win the lottery. You never know.
Win the
Right?
lottery or do consulting like you, Jeff. But I look at the qualities of the individuals that I'm working with now. And part of being a good leader is empowering them to lead, right? Making sure that they're not dependent on me to make decisions, but become solutions driven rather than complainers. And then I look for those areas within my leaders that may be deficient as well. And how do I make sure that I'm building them up to eventually one of them taking the seat that I'm in? And it's all about shared leadership for me, collaboration, and that support. That support is a critical component to their success as well. So in my 2 years in this position, I've been looking at people. I've been studying them. I've been looking at their strengths and weaknesses and making adjustments accordingly and planning accordingly as well.
You know, there's two different mindsets out there for leaders. One mindset is I come into a position and I bring on brand new people to the roles that report to me. And then there's a mindset like mine, which is I go into a position and I allow people to show me if they're able to rise to the new agenda and buy into the new vision, provide them the support to grow, and in turn see how they perform. And if they don't, then changes do need to take place. What's your mindset? And have you seen both? Have you done one? And how has it worked out for you?
So I've done the latter. I came into the position, I didn't make any changes. I maybe brought 2 people with me. And part of that was to see where people were, to see where their strengths are. Are they in the right place on the bus?
Exactly.
And offer them the support that they need. And that's part of the Leadership Academy that we have partnered with you on, making sure that they have the skill set, the competencies in their back pocket that they could use to effectuate the change that I want to see within the Virgin Islands Department of Education. And so I've done a sit back, look, assess, train, and then now I'm ready to make some changes in certain areas.
And Commissioner, feedback is so important. And particularly in leadership, we see that a lot of people have a hard time giving feedback, and they have even a harder time in receiving feedback. How have you made feedback part of your leadership with those individuals leading the rest of your team?
So I think feedback is very critical, and it has to come through a not confrontational manner. We're having a conversation just like you and I are having a conversation now. I meet with my senior cabinet on a weekly basis. We talk, I let them share with me their accomplishments, their challenges, and then we sit and we talk about, okay, so what do you think you should do to solve this problem? And if I see them struggling, then I would say, well, maybe you should try this, or here's something that I think might work. But, the decision is ultimately yours. I often say if I were in that position, or I remember when I was in that position, this is what I did. And that way it comes off as supportive, not so much do it this way, but it's a collaboration between me and my senior cabinet.
As Commissioner, what do you feel are the greatest struggles right now on the U.S. Virgin Islands with regards to student performance?
So literacy remains our biggest challenge, and mathematics. We've been through a tough time in the Virgin Islands. We had the 2 Category 5 storms, and then on top of that, the COVID pandemic. And
Which has impacted everybody.
everyone. So our students have lost a lot of instructional time. And so looking for ways to bridge those gaps, identify those areas of weaknesses, and provide the intervention supports to our students is what we're doing now. I do think that our focus needs to be on the early childhood level. Even if you go back before the pandemic hit, you would see some gaps that were identifiable in those early childhood years, that if we had our students reading on grade level by third grade, we won't be seeing these larger gaps that we continue to see. So our focus is on going back to some of the basics, Jeff. Science of reading, training our teachers on how to teach the basics of reading, and making sure, again, that they're trained and supported and coached through the process. Because if you want to see change, you got to monitor what's happening in the classroom.
I think a lot of people have forgotten the fact that we learned with the basics.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that everything is dressed up differently now with so many technological resources, but the students still need those basic skills. And post-COVID, I think the entire world has experienced that gap, and it has actually impacted long-term the outcomes that the students are having. How are you preparing your teachers for that?
So one of the things that we've started to work on with our teachers is looking at the data, something as simple as looking at the data and really looking at the trends that you're seeing within your particular population. After COVID and we came back to face-to-face, I, as the commissioner, decided not to use any of the data collected during the COVID time.
Yes, because
Face-to-face was last year. That was our baseline data, our starting point. And this year, we'll be able to see what kind of growth we have experienced. So we're establishing that culture of data chats and using the data to drive instruction, which is something that many weren't very comfortable with. But we were able to partner with several entities, to include yourself, that now forces us or encourages us to look at the data more. I've also told my team that even our budgets, our fiscal office, has to be aligned to our strategic plan.
Absolutely.
So that we're able to measure whether these funds that we're using for a particular initiative are actually making the gains that we want to see in student outcomes. At the end of the day, it has to be about student outcomes. So those are different shifts that we started to implement that.
100%. You said something that a lot of people have really lost, which is the understanding that your finance and your strategic plan and your data and demonstrating the gaps have to be aligned, because if not, you review the data, you identify the gaps that you really can't action on, and if you don't have the finances and your personnel in the right place. Do you feel that everyone has embraced that data-driven decision-making process?
Not quite yet. Again, it requires our administrators driving the charges within our schools, and me as the commissioner driving it on the state level, and demanding that we look at the data. When you bring a concept to me, an initiative to me, you should be able to support it with some kind of data. Why are we doing this? And how is this tied to student outcomes? And if you can't have that conversation, you can't sell the product to me,
of course,
then that's an issue. So it really is about fostering that culture that data matters in public education. And that's how we're going to see the growth that we need to see.
A lot of our parents worldwide are constantly saying, are educators being held accountable for the learning of my child, of the most precious thing I have? Because we know that parents drop off in the entrance of the schools their most precious jewels, right? How have you instituted accountability to make sure that as a parent, I know that the commissioner has the best interests of my child at her first priority? So
that's a very good question. Upon entering this position as commissioner, I've said to my team, accountability matters. And when the community starts to hold us accountable for different things, whether it be student achievement or the infrastructure challenges that we have, we can't get upset. That's their job. Their job is to hold us accountable for a quality public education. And so accountability is across the board. We answer to our students who are our clients. At the end of the day, if I have a student graduating from high school and has to enter remedial classes at a university, that's a systemic problem that we have to address. And so the accountability conversations are ongoing. And now we've started our partnership with you, with the Leadership Academy that focuses on the senior cabinet as well as principals and assistant principals, and getting them to understand how important accountability is, which has to be driven from the top down. And so the principals now are charged with using the skills and the resources that you've given us to help to drive that home with the teachers. But again, it cannot just be a top-down effect. Teachers have to have or find value in what it is that we're saying and understand why it's important that they look at the whole child when they're developing their classroom activities or whatever, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of every single learner.
You know, Commissioner, with accountability being such a priority, how are you dealing with the unions and labor for them to understand that the accountability is not about them, is not about you, it's about the children and making sure they're getting what they need each and every day? What is that relationship like for you? Because I know that a lot of superintendents worldwide would benefit from understanding that you have prioritized accountability and how you're dealing with the part that could be an obstacle to that.
So it's about building relationships. At the end of the day, it's really about relationships. And I've committed to meeting with the unions on a monthly basis. I give them an opportunity to share their concerns. I provide updates, and we talk about instruction. What are we doing about instruction? What resources does the union have to support the teachers with instruction? And one of the things that we've invested in is a platform that allows for professional development for our teachers. If we're going to build those skills that they're deficient in, and any area that they too might want to advance in, we need to make sure that everything is laid out for our teachers. So working together with the unions is what we're doing. We try to involve them in those big ticket decision-making things that, for example, we're looking at the evaluation system. Is it working the way that it's structured? What do we need to change? So these are conversations that we continue to have, because we do need the buy-in of the union if it's really going to be successful. So giving them a voice and allowing them to understand that they're a valued partner is the posture that I've taken as the Commissioner of Education.
You know, I agree with that, because I have found that if you include them in the takeoff, when they're in the air, they'll land safely with you.
Right.
I think as long as all of us have the same voice, the same mission, the same agenda, at the end, the interference will be minimal. Right. And I think if everyone would understand that accountability is not really a bad thing, but it's really the beginning of a successful outcome, people would not see it as a negative. I think too often the word accountability itself is seen by many as a negative, right?
Right.
How do you empower the parents to understand how they're accountable in the equation? Because I think sometimes parents say educators are accountable, and when you speak to the educators, they say the parents are the ones that are accountable. How are you educating your parents to understand they have a piece of that accountability for their child's success?
So we've started some parent campaigns and outreach. We've been partnering with other agencies to get into our communities. They've had parent seminars and workshops, and we want to bring back the parent conference and some of the things that used to work. When I was a principal, Jeff, I remember parents feeling a little bit intimidated to come into school, especially if, they don't have the educational background that they think they need in order to have a dialogue with a teacher. And so meeting them where they are and bringing them into the fold, having more activities at the school that allow parents to come in and see what it is that's happening, open houses and read together, or different initiatives that the districts have put together, and making sure that we're communicating as well, using multiple platforms, making their lives a little bit more better. We're getting ready to launch a new website. We're getting ready to implement a cashless system, so parents don't have to leave their jobs to come in to pay student fees, a fundraising, a donation, senior fees, or whatever. So we're trying our best to meet our clients, which are parents as well, where they are, and bring resources to them. So I shared that story about having a large population of Hispanics at my school when I was a principal. I can't speak Spanish, but I know that I needed to teach them English.
Exactly.
And so we had night classes, English classes, where I had members of the staff volunteer to come and teach the parents. They showed up in droves. Their desire to learn English was important because the education of their child is important, and being able to support and have conversations with the teachers is a critical component to a student's success. So simple things as making sure that we have our information in multiple languages, reading, our information at a sixth grade level, not with these huge words that parents can't understand, and just really providing the resources that they too may need to be successful parents.
Let me ask you, do you find that you have a large engagement from the parent population to the point where it's actually progressive in your territory, or are you still struggling with the level of parent involvement that's necessary to move education forward?
We're still struggling. I think we fell off during the COVID era. We're back in face-to-face now for the second year. And so it's about building back. There are many mediums to reach a parent now. It doesn't have to be face-to-face.
Correct.
We're maximizing on the virtual platforms.
That's awesome.
And again, meeting parents where they are. But in actuality, I would like to see more of a parent presence. I think that the parents don't advocate enough when it comes to their children's education, and we need them to be a viable partner in this process. It takes a village to raise children. So the public education system cannot do it without the parents. And so realizing that we're in partnerships and working together for the betterment of their children.
You know, a lot of your parents may be listening to this podcast, and if you had 3 questions that you would give to your parents as a tool when they go into the school and they're needing to ask these questions from a teacher to make sure that their children are getting the quality education, or that if their children have a gap, that they as a parent are informed, what would be those 3 basic questions that those parents should always ask their teachers anytime they engage with the parents?
First of all, how is my student doing in the classroom? What skills are they expected to master during this particular semester? How can I support my student's success? Is there any resources that you can provide to me as a parent to help my child that may be struggling in a particular area? Do you allow volunteers to come in? Can I be a part of your classroom? When can I do that? And what would you need from me as the parent to help you to be successful as a teacher? I mean, if they took that posture, we would see a difference in the relationship between parents and teachers.
You know, sometimes a lot of the parents are engaged in conversations with teachers, and it becomes more of pointing fingers as to who's responsible. What would you say to the parents as they are being able to become more aware of the fact that it's not a he's responsible or she's responsible, is how we're going to work together? How would you advise them to approach
you
it?
just took me down that road with the us principle. We're actually studying or working on our accountability as leaders. And, you know, when you start to point fingers, that's below the line. And so getting our parents to see that this is where we are, they have to see it.
Exactly.
They have to own it, right? We have to work together to solve it, and then we have to implement the actions that will bring about the change. So if you run across a parent who starts to point fingers, part of our job as leaders is to redirect them. Okay, I understand how you feel. You may be frustrated at this time, and so let me just explain to you where we are. This is the current problem. Here's what I was thinking about, because we have to own where we are in order to move forward.
Right.
This is what I think I'm going to do to assist your child in my classroom, for example. And then you do it, but then you double back and tell the parent, well, you know, based upon our conversation, this is what I did, and here are the results. That feedback portion and keeping our parents informed is a piece that we still have to continue to work on.
You know, Commissioner, the parents are a very important part of the puzzle. But I don't know if you've noticed, but I know that as we work nationwide, we're noticing that the students themselves are becoming an even greater part of the puzzle, not only in the decision making, but in the accountability. How are you educating the kids on the Virgin Islands to make sure they understand accountability from their seat?
So I've been working with our student councils at our high schools. I started that this year where I have monthly meetings with our student councils and the student reps from each grade level. And I must say those conversations have been very interesting, very enlightening.
They always are.
Right. Students actually have solutions to the problems that we are facing. For example, we have a teacher shortage in the Virgin Islands. And so we recruit from an international pool. And I remember sitting with students and them telling me that, you know, the international teachers struggle a lot for the cultural differences, language barriers, etc. And the student said to me, Commissioner, I think you should have an onboarding set of professional developments for our teachers who come from different places. And that will help them to learn a little bit about the Virgin Islands, as well as how do you deal with students when it comes to managing classrooms. That's a huge, huge problem that we see. And so I take the information that the students share and I share it with my senior cabinet, and we look for ways to implement the suggestions that they've given us.
You know, that's right, because we have recruited internationally too. And when the teachers come from international backgrounds, they do have that first obstacle of not understanding the culture, not understanding the way things work. And more importantly, they start to shut down and feeling insecure.
Right.
And so the fact that the children would suggest that is really admirable for them. But more importantly, I want us to talk about the students, and they're in a different generation, different mindset, and how that accountability over their own instruction and their own learning has come to a new level. How have you been mentoring them to be able to do that?
So I invested in a program called Navians. And Navians is a feature of the Power School system, which is the grading platform that we've been using for years. It's actually tied to the evaluation as well as the professional development module. So when our students sign in or our teachers sign into the platform, they're able to access those areas that are relevant to them. So Navians will give us a holistic perspective on the student and their journey. Students will be able to see their progress as well. I've talked to my high school students about them taking accountability for their learning. You know what you need to graduate from high school. How are you tracking your progress? Do you understand the importance of the SAT? Do you understand the importance of doing your best on the Smarter Balance assessment? So that they see the why. I remember you telling me that, Jeff. They see the why behind them making sure that they're putting their best foot forward. One of the things, though, I have to talk about a little bit with you is the fact that our students continue to say that their classrooms are not engaging, that their teachers do not know how to bring today's technological world into the instruction to make it meaningful. Our students have also said that the use of artificial intelligence in some of their eyes has dummied down their students' understanding of how to write effectively. You know, it's one thing you know in the basic grammatical things to form a sentence, and AI forming the sentence for you.
Exactly.
And so listening to those different concerns and their needs and bringing that to the forefront of the professional development that we may provide to our teaching population is critical, because we got to change what we're doing in the classroom if we're going to meet our students where they are.
And you know that we most recently had students in the studio talking about the future proofing of education. And alongside what you're saying, the students mentioned that though teachers have the best intention and they come to work each and every day wanting their students to succeed, there's a gap between how they're preparing for that experience and how the student wants to be engaged in the experience. And they're finding that sometimes the relevance of the tools that they're using are not aligned to what they are engaged in their generation.
So if I may, let me give you a prime example. In those same meetings with the students, they talked about this one mathematics class at this one high school. And they said they didn't know what the concept was. They said the teacher assigns us reading overnight. Just a flipped classrooms, right? They read before they come in. They have discussions about what they read. They go through mathematical concepts together. The teacher does it. They do it together, and then they do it alone. So they didn't know what it was, but they preferred that way rather than coming into the classroom and sitting down reading together. They felt that they were able to engage more with the teacher as a facilitator, with their peers in different groups. And so they said, can you do that in every class? Can that be an initiative that is done in every class? And so those types of conversations are valuable because students, again, have solutions to some of what we're missing in some of our classrooms.
But you know that because when we were growing up, no one asked us, how do you
Oh, no.
feel? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
How do you want to learn? It was you go into school, what the teacher said was the law. And I think sometimes some of our educators are still educating our current generation the way they learned. And we're so different. And more importantly, giving that respect to the students to say, how do you feel? How would you want to learn? And understanding that this is a generation of choice is very important, because if we don't give them choice, just like we want a voice at the table, if we don't give the children a voice at the table, they're going to exclude us.
Yes.
And I tell educators as I work nationwide, every day you must earn the respect of the students and the permission to teach them.
That's right.
And a lot of our educators don't realize that each and every day through the lesson you plan, you are either going to get the permission from the student to teach them or you're not.
No, you're not.
And long gone are the days that you can just get to a classroom and believe you're going to open your teacher guide and teach, because the experience needs to be more engaging. Students are scrolling up and down and they're engaged in videos that are talking to them. And very seldom are they just sitting there throughout their day and listening to someone talk. And I think we really have to revamp the way that we're doing that. Do you feel that students see education and the school as the way they're going to succeed in the future?
Some, I think that for many, there's a gap in them connecting. And you and I talked just today about certain subjects that are required for graduation, and students are wondering, when am I going to use this again? Why do I have to learn this? Why is this important to me? And so making sure that we are able to make the connections for them, I think, is the route that we need to go. I do feel that our students need more choice in the Virgin Islands, that we have students who are career and technical education track that need to have more pathways towards that. We have some students who may just graduate from high school and go into the workforce. I think the Department of Education has a responsibility to help them to get connected with jobs outside of school based on their interest levels. So really opening the door and allowing our students to have more choice and more say, because a lot of times we're dealing with an older population of teachers who have been in the system for a long time, who are teaching the way we were taught.
Exactly.
And our students are not getting or making those connections. Our students are looking for innovative and creative ways to produce, to create. And sometimes I feel like people are uncomfortable with allowing the children to take charge.
And also, I think that some of the teachers who, again, have the best interests, but are struggling with the dynamics of the culture in a classroom, because their mindset is on, I'm at the front, I have my students, before me, and I am the expert and I'm providing expertise. And long gone are those days, because in reality, it's a co-teaching experience, because sometimes the students in the classroom have more of the answer than the educators themselves, because now they have access to a tool that gives them the information that we did not have when we were growing up. And I think a lot of people still have an immunity to changing and understanding that we're either going to change because change is inevitable.
That's right.
Or the students are going to exclude us as the pathway to their success, especially because we're going into a world that's unknown.
That's right.
And we're really preparing them for something that is changing every minute.
Correct.
And how are you dealing with that in the territory as commissioner to make sure that your senior leadership and your principals and teachers understand that we're really needing to be 5 steps ahead because we are preparing our students for a world that we do not understand right now.
And that's the shift that we have to see within the classrooms in terms of allowing our students to create, to be innovative. We need to embrace technology more. A student said to me, when I don't know, I go on TikTok. I look for a video that explains that particular math problem and how to solve it. And so that's where our students are. And so we teach them the skills, but the avenues for them to utilize the skills has to be more creative. And we're looking for more of a magnet approach. Every school shouldn't look the same.
Exactly.
And that way we're going to be able to provide that choice that our children need, and really training up our people on the technology. A lot are still not embracing the technology. Using a smart board as a projector is not embracing technology.
Exactly.
So
those were the initial days, right? We would go into a classroom, see a smart board on, and we say, this teacher is integrating technology. That's
not what it is. And so really making sure that they're trained on how do I bring technology into this particular lesson. I think that when I look back at when I started to teach in 1993, we didn't have all of this.
Nope. A chalkboard.
We had a chalkboard, whiteboard, a marker. You don't have to recreate the wheel. There's so many resources that teachers can tap into. It's just a matter of sitting, preparing, planning, and executing. So getting them to the place where the resources are there. So how do we take these resources, create collaborative lessons that could be across a thematic lesson planning? It worked for me. I used to sit down with the art teacher, the math teacher, with science concepts when I was a science teacher. And we worked together on lesson planning. And you taking that planning and taking it to another level that incorporates that creativity and that innovation that our children so desperately want to be able to showcase. So it's going to take a lot of training and a lot of support. And one of the things that I've said to my senior cabinet is you should be able to walk in a classroom and teach a lesson.
Exactly.
You should be able to teach a lesson that is engaging, and the teacher should be able to watch you and take notes from what you're doing. But, that culture has to be one that we promote as we're moving forward. And this upcoming year, the dynamics of the department is changing. We're taking off the responsibility of infrastructure. And they've established a bureau that's going to deal with maintenance and infrastructure challenges.
Because that takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time. So now we're getting into the weeds, which is instruction. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see us going in and support. I want to go in as a commissioner and teach a lesson. I can do it. Can you? Making sure that our principals are instructional leaders.
But Commissioner, that the leaders that are still in the management mindset, when you take away the construction, which they have as an excuse to say this occupies my time, and now they have to go into the instructional leadership, that could be challenging. How are you going to prepare them so that becomes
We're
successful?
definitely going to have to do more training because a lot of them have been in the management for quite some time. And so now we're asking them to change their mindsets back to student instruction, teaching and learning. And so I know that we're going to have to provide some support to them as well, but the accountability is going to be there. Because if we're going to see the changes we want to see, then we all have to be instructional leaders.
So I'm a student in the U.S. Virgin Island territory, and I'm listening to you, and I'm also recognizing and reflecting on what I'm experiencing in the classroom. And why should I be patient? And what am I going to see in the next 2 years that's going to be different for me under your leadership?
So you're going to see more student input into what is taking place on the campuses. It could be instruction, it could be programming. We want to be able to meet our students' needs, and that means us listening to our students, being active listeners. You're going to see principals being more instructional leaders within their buildings. You're going to see improved student opportunities, culture. In our conversation, something as simple as having a room or a space that students can go and just let it out. A Zen room. Those are requests that came from students. Mental health issues are on the rise. And so we can't take for granted that our students need services, making sure that we have those wraparound services within our schools, making sure that our classrooms are engaging. That means that we are training up our people with resources that they can use to engage our students, but also making sure that we support them in the process and we're monitoring what is taking place. So they're going to see improved infrastructure, of course, because we're getting ready to build new schools. We're refurbishing our schools. We have contracts in place to do a lot of that work over the summer. But more importantly, you're going to see a focus on student outcomes. That means the development of the whole child, behaviorally, physically, socially, spiritually, the whole child. And so look for improvements in our schools as we move forward.
And as a student, I'm in a classroom, and how should I know that this is a classroom commissioner approves? What should I experience in my classroom that tells me this is the type of classroom that our commissioner is advocating for, versus I'm sitting in a classroom that if the commissioner were to walk in, she would say, this is unacceptable?
So you definitely should see student engagement. And one of the things that we have embraced is the gradual release model. So teachers do first, we do it together, and then students do it by themselves. Something as simple as differentiated seating. Our children need options. They should not have to sit behind a desk in rows. There should be options that are afforded to them for learning.
And standing up is
And
now
standing up
it's
is
really
an
important now.
option. It is an option.
I bought a new desk for my office. I have the version that I can stand up and work on the computer or just sit down. And I think our students are needing to have that opportunity as well.
And then you should see more of a welcoming environment, more conversation, relationships between teachers and students. That was a big piece as well. That there's some teachers that just don't want to have conversations with students. You get into my class, you sit in your seat, you do as I say. But opening that to where our teachers are comfortable having the conversations with students and allowing students to take the lead, that teachers become more of facilitators than taking everything. And I used to tell my teachers all the time, Jeff, if you leave school tired, you didn't do your job well.
You're working too hard.
You're working too hard. You're not working smart. And so giving the teachers the understanding that it's okay to relinquish control, that you are to allow your students to take control.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your governor. It seems that he's very focused on education, giving you the opportunity to lead those initiatives you're discussing. Tell us a little bit about his focus, his educational platform and agendas, and how far are we in accomplishing those on the Virgin Islands?
So I know one of the biggest piece of the governor's agenda is workforce development. He is very much interested in making sure that our children have opportunities, that our children are engaged outside of the classroom, welcoming partnerships. We've had conversations about mentorship. That's one area I think that we could improve on greatly, and our students can benefit from the community input. We are exploring Korean Technical College in the Virgin Islands in partnership with the University of the Virgin Islands. And so looking for ways to, expand the Korean technical field. The governor is very much interested in making sure that the whole child is developed like us, making sure that our achievement scores increase,
Of course.
making public education a viable option to our community.
That's awesome.
And so he has put his support behind the department, behind me, in providing resources when I ask. He was very instrumental in me being able to have the Leadership Academy that you and I have partnered with to do with the senior cabinet and the principals and assistant principals.
And leadership is very important.
We've put a lot of the oversight back into our schools. So our federal dollars are now going to be at the schools. And so the school improvement plans will be supported with funding again. We will be able to measure whether the initiatives that the schools are taking is actually benefited from the funding, and we're seeing the gains that we want to see. So a lot more focus on site-based management and really putting the onus back into the school, allowing the teams to come up with actions and strategies to help to drive their unique population.
Commissioner, let me ask you, the teacher recruitment situation is a burden across the nation right now. It's one of the areas that all superintendents, commissioners, principals are really reflecting upon, because the gaps of having that qualified person before the students is growing. How is that impacting you in the Virgin Islands, and what alternatives are you looking to seek?
So it's impacting us as well. Like I mentioned, we do a lot of recruitment internationally. And what I've had my team do is some right sizing. Our population has also declined. So therefore, there may be some extra bodies that we can move around to ensure that we have a qualified, certified teacher in front of our students.
Is your population declining because they're moving out, or because the growth of babies?
It has been steadily declining over the past 10 years.
Wow.
And the storms didn't help, neither did COVID. People left the territory, but I think that they're going to come back. And so even with the infrastructure changes that we're making and the new buildings and everything that we're doing, we're going to see families moving back, because now there'll be more opportunities as we develop our infrastructure at home. But, making sure that everything is in place, making sure that we all have the resources that we need is the direction that we definitely will go.
Is there a plan to groom teachers from within? Are you working with people that are not certified to certify them?
Yes. So the districts utilize some of their federal funding to do counselor training, to provide classes at the University of the Virgin Islands for paraprofessionals who are interested in becoming teachers. As we discussed today, I want to be able to do more succession planning. So those individuals that may have the credentials to become assistant principals, for example, starting back the assistant principal academy, so that we have a cadre of qualified individuals that we can pull from to fill our vacancies. But the right sizing, the recruitment and retention, having more acceptable packages for teachers, all of those avenues are being explored by our HR division.
Is salary competitive right now in your
we're about to raise it to $50,000 to start. Still needs to be more. But we've been making some steady increases under this administration. The governor has really invested into our teachers and our administrators, and that effort will continue. So in the interim, I think it's really about maximizing resources, making sure that we are filling the needs at every single site. And that means looking at our student to teacher ratios and making the adjustments that are needed.
Commissioner, across the nation, a lot of superintendents are now looking at staggered schedule. We know that the generation that we currently are servicing in the workforce is about time and really having that work-life harmony. And the growth of districts moving to a 4-day schedule is growing. What conversations have you had in your department or in your territory around that? And is that even an option for you right now?
We have not had conversations around it, but I don't think that there's anything preventing us from having them. I think that most of the trends that we see nationwide eventually come to the territory as discussions as well. And so that's something that we can definitely explore. We definitely need to look at our scheduling a little bit more closely. Are we really meeting the needs of our children in the block scheduling, for example, at the middle school and high school level? Or do we need to go back to the 45-minute schedule that we used to have in the past? And so those decisions will be based on the data and what we're seeing. And we have to know that education is fluid. What may have worked in the past may not be what our
Because
students
our
need
students are
today.
different.
Right. Our students are different. And then we understand that literacy and math still remains a problem. So having a block schedule might not be where we need to be with those two particular disciplines.
A lot of the districts that have implemented the 4-day schedule have seen a reduction in absences at the teacher level and a reduction in teachers going home early because now they have that 5th day to go to the doctor appointments, to take care of personal items that typically they would have to take days off for. In one of our schools in Vegas, we're going to implement it next year because there's such a growth in that across the nation and the impact that it's having on mental health for the individual, because you have a 3-day break before you go back into the school. Another thing that I wanted to ask you, Commissioner, is the 4-day schedule is something that a lot of people are considering, but also with the lack of teachers, a lot of individuals and superintendents across the nation are looking at the artificial intelligence as a means to teach their students when a teacher is out. I know that California is in the process of having that class become individual for the student, where each child has a class of their own, a teacher of their own, through the artificial intelligence. Is that something that in your territory is a conversation, or has that ever been a topic thus far, or is that something that you're
It hasn't been a topic thus far. What we have done is procured the services of some virtual teachers. We do have a distance learning bill that has been passed. And so having that partnership has allowed us to fill some of those hard to fill vacancies through the virtual platform. We have also utilized some of our teachers that are interested in earning some additional funds to teach during the prep period, those subject areas that we don't have teachers for. So we've been creative in it, but I think it's time for us to step it up a notch and look at the AI and see how we can make sure that we have our children's vested interests at heart and that we're providing, however, we can.
Especially for the contents that are difficult, right? Because we have those high-level content.
So for example, one of my biggest pet peeves is foreign languages, something that we take for granted. But knowing a foreign language opens up so many more avenues for a student in this competitive world. And so right now, we can't find teachers for Spanish, for French, not to mention Mandarin and all the other languages that
and being bilingual and biliterate is so important right now.
It's very important. So we were able to fill some of those gaps through the virtual partnership that we have. But maybe we need to look into the AI because I believe in having a menu of choice and not limiting our students to just what we may have a physical body to provide.
The school year 24-25 is opening up in August. What is your agenda for that school year? What would make you feel at the end of the year, I accomplished a successful 24-25?
To really see the gains in student outcomes, to poll our students and see where they are, what are the things that they would like to see, and make sure that we are implementing and meeting their needs as well. Having schools that are ready to welcome students for the new school year, painted, refreshed, full of life. That's part of what the students talk about, and offering more of a choice to them to make sure that, again, the things that are of interest to them are being provided in our
Is
schools.
school of choice an agenda item for the governor and for you in your
In the
projection?
future, as we do our rebuilding, like I mentioned, we're focusing on a magnet program and to allow our students to have choice. So, for example, we have been blessed. We have over $1.6 billion in rebuilding funding through FEMA for the disaster recovery work. And so the majority of our campuses are going to be rebuilt.
That's awesome.
So it's
Because
going to...
aesthetics are important.
Aesthetics are critical.
A lot of people underestimate the importance of the environment being welcoming for our students. When I was a principal, I used to tell my teachers, your environment in your classroom needs to be like your home. You have to make sure that kids want to be there. They feel comfortable.
Yes.
Because the energetic field of the environment is going to really drive how they feel.
Right. And so we talked about that in our last training with NAEP. making sure that we have the resources available. Something that I used to do as a principal is I would get all the paper for the boards, all the borders, all the letter making,
absolutely.
everything. The laminating machine was in a production room, and my teachers just had to create the vision, and they would be able to execute right at the fingertips. So making sure that we have the resources available for them to use and not have to dig into their pockets all the time is something that I want to see and I want to promote through the school improvement plans, because again, it's about if you say that having a welcoming environment is important in your school, then you got to make sure that the teachers have the resources to execute. Yes.
I know that nationwide charter schools have been an initiative, and I know in the territory that has not been an option for school of choice. Is that something that you see under your leadership and under the governor's time, or is that something that is not on the agenda for your territory?
It's not on the immediate agenda, but it should be. I think it's time for us to embrace maybe having a pilot charter school in a district. Let's see how it goes. Charter schools operate totally different to the regular public school setting in the fact that people who work in the charter schools are not unionized, so there's a lot more flexibility in how you manage your people. But senators are interested, because I've had some informal conversations with senators who are ready to see something different in the island. So I definitely would like to start the conversation. If it doesn't come to fruition under this administration, it's not something that I think we should just let go. I think it's time for us to do it.
Absolutely. And as we reach the closing of our podcast, you have 2 years that you have on your agenda, at least in the near future. And you're already at 30 years in your career. So technically, you could go home at any time. You win the lottery or you decide to do something different. What would you want your legacy to be as a commissioner?
You know, many ask me about my legacy. And Jeff, it's really about the children. It's really about making sure that when students leave our doors, they're truly prepared for life. And that means making sure that, again, it's not just academics, it's socially. It's, you know, we were talking about financial literacy today, making sure that they understand what it takes for them to be successful as adults. And even if they're going to college, to a career and technical school, to the military, to the workforce, I feel as the commissioner, we have a responsibility to know where every single student is going, and to make sure that we have charted that course for their success. So for me, it's to know that my students are where they need to be, that they are prepared, and they are successfully entering into the next phase of their lives. And to make sure that, you know, public education is an option. It's not the last resort, that we have qualified individuals who love children, who care about children, who want to see the best in children, and that we're supporting the people who are about to bring forth the changes that we want to see. So for me, it's about support. It's about making sure that resources are in the hands and making sure that our children have what they need and remain the center of our focus.
You know, Commissioner, mental health, you mentioned briefly, and it's
Yes.
something that across the nation right now is such a very important topic for all of us, because as leaders, not only are our children confronting mental circumstances and struggling with their own feelings and emotions, but our staff, our employees are as well. And it does interfere with their day-to-day peace to be able to carry out their work. How are you dealing with that in the territory and in your department to make sure that the resources are there for them when they need it, and that the appropriate self-reporting is there?
So we've struggled with providing wraparound services. We don't have social workers in our schools. That is a hard-to-fill area.
Absolutely.
And so what we've done with some of our ARPA funding is partner with the Department of Health to provide some of that wraparound service, not just to students and families, but to our staff as well. And through our insurance with Cigna, you know, we encourage our teachers to get the wraparound services, which is free of charge, to get a therapist, to have an outlet, and just to really surround our people. I think part of what happens, we get caught up in the day-to-day, and we're not checking in with our employees like we should. And so, creating that atmosphere of or that relationship between management and the people in the trenches to know that, hey, you need something, come to me. I do have individuals that call me all the time. Sometimes it's just a vent about things that may be happening personally. These are employees.
Of course.
And so I would steer them in a direction, or I would be that listening ear, but making sure that we provide the resources to our faculty and staff, as well as our students and families. And another thing that we're doing is partnering all the entities that service our families, working together to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the families. I say it all the time, happy families make happy students.
Absolutely.
And so we cannot turn a blind eye to the needs of our people.
It's a collaborative effort,
course.
and more importantly, if everyone's needs are met, then we all are successful in the equation of educating our children. Commissioner, I want to thank you for being part of our podcast today. I think that this has given an opportunity for not only the individuals in your territory to listen to what's happening and what you are leading at your table and at your position, but worldwide, these are things that other leaders can benefit from in listening to the things that you're doing. And more importantly, as a parent, understanding the responsibility a parent has and understanding the children's opportunities. And as a children, the children in our school, as a child, they need to know what they need to do and how they're able to access that. So you have all your listeners, your entire territory. This is a grand opportunity for you to share with them a motivating conversation around what's next and how do they make sure that they seize that opportunity. Take it away.
So as the Commissioner of the Department of Education, I just want to ensure all of the employees of the Department of Education that it takes all of us working together as a team, that our approach needs to be one that remains above the line where we see a problem and together we solve the problem. We don't have a perfect world, but if we continue to keep our students at the forefront of what we're doing, we will weather any storm that comes our way. You have my commitment. I am very much 100% student-centered, and I want to make sure that the teachers, the paraprofessionals, and those who are working within our schools have what they need in order to be successful. So my focus is on accountability, but it's also on providing that much-needed support to you so that you could be successful in the jobs that you're in. So look forward to more support, more visits. I am just a phone call away. Don't hesitate to reach out should you have a need. And it's not just about making sure that the students have what they need, but making sure that you have what you need as well. And so the growth and development of all of you, again, physically, socially, emotionally, is very important to me. And I am here to support you in any way that I can. So together we shall rise, and together we shall ensure that our students have what they need in order to be successful citizens in our community.
That's amazing. What an opportunity to be led by someone that has that belief and, more importantly, that heart in everything you do. I can confirm that because I've seen you grow through the ranks in the time that we've been together in our partnership, which has been a couple of years now. And to be able to see that everything you're saying is real, because there's so many stage stories out there, and to be able to have the opportunity to listen to an educator who really says what she means, does what she says, and more importantly, she inspects what she expects.
That's right.
And so we had the opportunity today here in our studio to have Commissioner Dionne Wells, who not only came to us for this purpose, but more importantly, to educate you, our listeners, on the importance of the future proofing of education. We understand that currently in some of our classrooms, we need to tweak some things to make sure that our children are ready for a world that awaits that none of us really understand. And we know that the U.S. Virgin Islands, as you heard for yourself from the commissioner, is on its way to prepare their students for that world of tomorrow. More importantly, empowering their educators that are on the job each and every day, making sure that they have the tools they need to be able to provide that experience for our students. And because it's not their students, your students, my students, it's our students, because education is the genius of our democracy. And the student in the U.S. Virgin Islands could be the doctor tomorrow that's operating you. And so it's our collective responsibility to make sure that our students are ready for a world of tomorrow. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. To the U.S. Virgin Islands, thank you for making us part of your family. National Academic Educational Partners and Lewa Jeffrey, always excited to be there. You guys have an amazing territory on a great mission to educate your children. To all of our parents and students that are listening, please make sure that you take an integral part in the education of your children, and that you as a student take accountability for your own education, and that you don't hesitate to say, I'm not learning, I need your help, this is not meeting my needs, this is what I need. Because you are the client. You are the person that all of us are there for, you, the student. But you have the responsibility to tell the adults what you want for you to be able to be successful. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, and stay inspired.